Hi there. I'm John Pahl, the Peter Paul and Elizabeth Hagen Professor of the History of Christianity at United Lutheran Seminary, with campuses in Philadelphia and Gettysburg, and with students and faculty at locations all over the world. I'm coming to you today from the library of my home in Clintonville, Wisconsin, near Green Bay, where I live with my wife, Lisa, two cats, Layla and Izzy, and our dog Otis, who you may hear from if the UPS or FedEx truck happens to show up. We live on Pigeon Lake, 174 acres of watery beauty, and we are fortunate to own 3 acres of pine, maple, and oak forest through which I've cut trails to walk and to pray each morning with Otis. That forest is a true place of peace for me, and that's what I want to talk about today. What peace means, and how we can grow peace. The Lenten devotional of which this video is a part emerged as a class project in a course I taught at ULS in March 2024. It's a great group. You'll meet them all along the way. Carla Christopher, Elizabeth Shetter, Teresa O'Connor, Max Miller, Lindsay Struth, David Hope Tringali. We had a blast together. Lots of learning, lots of laughter. I love collaborative learning, so when the students proposed a single final project to which they would all contribute, I was completely on board. This Lenten devotional series of videos and an accompanying daily devotional booklet is the result. The topic is Seeds of Peace. I'll explain shortly. As I teach about religions, violence, and peace, the course has 2 units. First, we study violence, and then we study peace. It's an unpleasant part of our history and our present that our faith traditions have often been exploited by demagogues who construct us versus them dualisms, setting people against each other in the name of God or their ego, which in some cases is identical. We read my book, Empire of Sacrifice, The Religious Origins of American Violence, which profiles violence in the U.S. U.S. history along the lines of age against children and youth, race against African Americans, and gender and sexuality against women and sexual minorities. That's some heavy lifting, but it's crucial to recognize that our traditions are not innocent. Growing peace can't ignore the harm religions can do. Violence, then, as I define it, is harm to or destruction of life, whether physical, social, economic, cultural, or linguistic. There are lots of ways to do harm to and destroy life, alas. We also read Hannah Arendt's little book on violence. Arendt helpfully differentiates violence from power. Power is not a dirty word to Hannah Arendt. Power is the capacity of people to act in concert, to which I add, drawing from Martin Luther King Jr.'s definition of power, to achieve purpose. Power, then, is the capacity of people to act in concert to achieve purpose. I like that definition because it points to the collective character of power. True power is power with, not power over. This Lenten devotional, then, is an exercise in power with, in true power, as Hannah Arendt sees it. God's power, namely love, is like that. It's power with, or even empowerment, empowering another. I hope you find this series empowering, and I hope it brings you peace. Peace, then, is often thought of as some kumbaya, granola-eating, happy-clappy on 1 and 3, music-listening, Birkenstock-wearing utopia. But peace, the second unit of our course, is nothing more utopian than the capacity to flourish. Isn't that something? Peace is, like power, a process more than a destination. So this Lenten series will invite you to reflect on peace, that capacity to flourish, and how we can grow peace together. I say grow peace because I believe the current prevailing metaphor that we must build peace misrepresents the organic dynamic that is at the heart of the process. Peace growing requires cultivating peace, as in a garden. Cultivating comes from the same root as the word for worship, the Latin cultus. So peace growing is ultimately a process of devotion, of paying attention. Peace growing means devoting oneself to cultivating flourishing. When we grow peace, we imagine an outcome, flourishing, that may or may not be achieved in one's lifetime, but that draws one's labor, one's liturgy, anyway. Just as violence is multi-layered and intersectional, so is peace. I describe 3 intersecting layers to peace growing. What I call basic peace is the flower in the garden. Basic peace is the last result or the ultimate aim, the absence of war or explicit conflict. This is often called negative peace in the peace studies field. It's the absence of war or overt conflict. But basic peace also has a positive element. Peace results when people have a voice in how they live. By calling this basic peace, I invert the way peace is often discussed. In many academic and policy circles, negative peace, namely ending war or conflict, is the only kind of peace that gets talked about. But basic peace, or the absence of war, grows out of so many other processes that I find it helpful to describe 2 other layers of peace growing, what I call policy peace and deep peace. Policy peace grows when we organize our political lives, our collective decision-making, so that resources are available equitably. Food, housing, education, transportation, electricity, healthcare, all the resources of social and economic life. Here, peace grows out of justice. Like violence, follows from and is inherent in injustice. To return to our gardening metaphor, this is the layer of weeding, thinning, and watering in the garden, removing excess, preventing crowding, ensuring fair access to nutrients, light, and so forth. At times, peace gets reduced to policy peace too. If we only all had enough water or energy or land or whatever, conflicts would cease. I think this is naive, but economic reductionism is very real in a capitalist society. But I believe we need to go deeper to realize the cultural roots of peace. Yes, we need to cultivate just policies to distribute social goods equitably, certainly more equitably than in the current kleptocratic inequality. But humans do not live by bread alone. We need to grow what I call deep peace, and it is in the soil, at the roots, that our religious traditions and religious leaders do our work well or fail. Deep peace, then, is nothing fancier than trust. We are at peace, we can flourish when we trust each other, and trust results from the planting and cultivating of what I call the 5 seeds of deep peace. These 5 are the most basic practices that foster the capacity to flourish among humans and for the planet. We'll take each one up in turn, but collectively, the 5 seeds of deep peace are learning, repeating the nonviolent practices at the heart of a tradition like prayer, fasting, and pilgrimage, engaging empathy, being a principled pluralist, and building social enterprises. Together, these 5 practices are seeds of deep peace, ways to grow the capacity to flourish by deepening trust. Learning isn't only the 3 R's, although those are important. Learning also means being educated in one's tradition, developing what historian of religions R. Scott Appleby called the capacity for second-order reflection on one's faith. Learning one's tradition, in other words, also means learning the self-critical scientific skills to understand the place of the tradition in history, society, and culture. To borrow from the Turkish Muslim preacher Fethullah Gülen, one of the peace growers we studied in the course, we must learn to fly with 2 wings to grow peace. That is, we grow peace when we hold together science and spirituality. We grow peace when we learn both the truth about the natural and social worlds and the truth about God, as our ancestors in the faith have taught it. Learning is the first seed of deep peace. As I often say to young people, when you learn to learn, and even more, when you learn to love learning, you've received a gift that will last forever. Love of learning, many medieval Christian mystics thought, was a form of love for God. Learning is the first seed of deep peace, of growing trust. The second seed of deep peace is being engaged with the nonviolent practices at the heart of one's tradition. Every religious tradition has multiple nonviolent practices that get repeated, that are normative, in other words. Christians pray, sing, preach, dream, baptize, go on pilgrimage, share a meal, pledge charity, recite creeds, serve their neighbors, and more. These social practices foster the capacity to flourish. They grow deep peace. Prayer, for instance, is inherently nonviolent. You can't kill somebody when your head is bowed, your hands upraised, and you're honestly talking to and listening for God. Lima Bowie, the Liberian peace grower we also studied in the course, organized the Muslim and Christian women of Liberia not only to protest the civil war raging around them, but to pray together. And it worked. Between them, the Christian and Muslim women of Liberia ended a civil war that had been going on for 10 years. They helped forge a new constitution for Liberia. And that led to the election of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf as the first female president of an African nation. And I could go on. Our traditions are rich with practices like prayer that grow deep peace, that foster trust and the capacity to flourish. The third seed of deep peace is what I call engaged empathy. Gandhi, another of the peace growers we studied, was a trained British lawyer. He could have earned a very good living as a barrister, first in South Africa and then in his native India. But he saw the suffering of his people, their poverty, and he sought to do something about it, their oppression at the hands of the British Raj. So Gandhi marched with them, wove cotton with them on his spinning wheel, and organized them in boycotts of British salt, which they then harvested for free from the ocean. And he did this as a Hindu. That's engaged empathy, realizing the suffering of others, feeling that suffering in your womb, in your being, and organizing to do something about alleviating that suffering insofar as possible. Thich Nhat Hanh, the late Buddhist teacher, calls it interbeing. We grow deep peace when we recognize that suffering anywhere is a threat to peace everywhere. Or as the Buddha taught us, life is suffering. So there's always work to do on behalf of reducing suffering, right? That's engaged empathy, growing peace by fostering trust as we work together to end or alleviate suffering. We do that in many ways as Christians, as charity work, yes, but also in outreach and missions to accompany others, in disaster relief, and much more. Engage empathy grows peace by expanding the capacity to flourish in trusting relationships with others. The fourth seed of deep peace I call principled pluralism. The great historian of religions, Diana Eck, described three ways of being religious in the United States. Exclusivist, my way or the highway. Inclusivist, you can join us insofar as you become like us. And pluralist, we're all in this together, and each of us knows only a part. But pluralism can often slip into relativism, where anything goes, and that doesn't grow peace, it grows anarchy. Instead, I talk about principled pluralism, knowing where you stand, who you are, so that you can contribute constructively to collective work with another, even if we don't agree on everything. My grandfather, John Olson, grew peace as a farmer on a small, sustainable dairy farm. He once said to me, when I asked him about the secret of his marital success, he'd been married to my grandmother Ruth for 50 years. Well, somebody once said, if two people agree perfectly on everything, one of them is unnecessary. He has a point. I hope you agree. Principled pluralism recognizes that we grow stronger when we work together without reacting to disagreements or ego assertions or even violence. The biblical scholar Walter Wink, in his little book, Jesus and Nonviolence, argues that the first principle of nonviolent resistance, of peace growing, is do not mirror evil. That is, act in accordance with your deepest principles, no matter what, and grant others the dignity of difference, as Rabbi Jonathan Sacks put it in a book with that as its title. I know I've become a better Christian through my interreligious engagements with Jews, Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, and many others. The great historian of religions, Max Mueller, once said, whoever knows one religion knows none. Truth is two-eyed, is another way to put it, quoting theologian of religions John Cobb. We grow peace through being principled pluralists, practicing our faith and granting others the freedom to practice theirs, ideally in ways we can come together and share. I love the opportunities I've had to experience so many different kinds of devotion, human beauty and corporate activity, architecturally, artistically, musically, and so much more. Principled pluralism grows trust, grows deep peace. The fifth and final seed of deep peace is organizing ourselves into social enterprises. Capitalism isn't going away, and the organization of capital for various purposes is the challenge of sustaining the planet for future generations. Principled capitalism is the idea here, taking the resource mobilization ability of corporations, which is undeniable, and turning it toward the common good. This may take the form of nonprofits, such as the many social ministry organizations that do so much good in the United States, or it may take the form of a for-profit business that exists to serve social purposes. For example, Habitat for Humanity. Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus articulated the practices well in his book, A World Without Poverty, The Future of Social Business. And he did this as a Muslim. In social enterprises or social businesses, there's a triple bottom line: the planet, people, and profits in that order. And here's the thing. In a voluntary society like ours, every congregation, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and so forth, is a social business with the potential to sponsor other social enterprises. That is, we organize resources for the collective good, and the more resources we organize, the more good we can do. In the last congregation I served, for instance, Union Congregational UCC in Green Bay, we began a nonprofit called the Brain Center of Green Bay in the basement of the church. Our mission is to care for individuals and families dealing with neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Many services exist for people and families dealing with neurodegenerative diseases, but many doctors and nurses and families simply don't know about those services. So we set out in the Brain Center to care, to collaborate with those other agencies to get people the services they needed, to advocate for overcoming the stigma still associated with these often debilitating diseases, to research best practices and treatments, and to educate the public about how to preserve and to protect brain health, collaboration, advocacy, research, and education, care. From a single employee and board of directors, the Brain Center has grown to a network of volunteer coaches, 4 full-time employees, a very active board, and hundreds of individuals and families served for free over the past 5 years. That's a social enterprise, recognizing a profound need and organizing economic and human resources to address it. Peace follows from that kind of business, from enhancing the capacity to flourish among those who are often the least among us, the ill, the poor, the aged. Trust grows through such care. All right, so those are the 5 seeds of deep peace, the 5 ways you can plant a garden in which flourishing is possible, whether that's in a congregation, in your home, in your individual relationships. I hope you enjoy the remaining videos, which will be briefer than mine. Professorial privilege, I guess. And I hope you enjoy the devotional booklet that accompanies the videos. I truly enjoyed working with this group of students as we learned together about the plague of violence and as we learned about ways we can grow peace. Thanks for listening. May your Lent be fruitful and your Easter joyous. Peace.